All right, close your eyes for just a second. I want you to imagine the scent of moist earth, freshly brewed coffee, and the rich, unmistakably elegant perfume of Cuban tobacco just dancing in bluish spirals all around you. Got it? Great. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're stepping right into an incredibly smoky, mysterious, and absolutely fascinating literary atmosphere to unpack Edo Cruz's novel, Dantes' Smoke and Rum with Fidel, Camilo, and Che. Now, this isn't just your standard story. It is this vibrant, animated blend of magical realism and deep political philosophy that manages to tackle some of the most complex issues of our time in a really casual, entertaining, and creative way. So let's dive right into the provocative premise of the book. What if you could actually sit down and discuss the future of a nation with the very ghosts of its revolutionary past? It's a wild idea, right? The author, Edo Cruz, uses this supernatural dialogue to impartially explore potential solutions to modern crises. It's a highly entertaining thought experiment. Instead of giving us a dry, academic political essay, Cruz builds this vivid dreamscape where historical icons literally sit around a table and debate the demanding realities of today. Part 1, Un sueño en La Habana, a dream in Havana. Our story kicks off right at twilight in the city. The sun is just starting to say its goodbyes, tinting the Caribbean horizon with these striking, beautiful shades of gold and crimson. And here is where we meet Dantes. He's a Cuban expat who's returned to his native island from France for a vacation. He's sitting out on his hotel terrace, he nods off, and instantly, he's transported in his mind to a mystical, smoky cabin hidden deep within the lush, emerald-green vegetation of the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Cruz paints this scene with what feels like a 4K visual atmosphere. You've got these intense violet shadows guarding revolutionary secrets, and the only light inside the cabin? It's coming from the glowing red embers of Dantes' Cohiba Bajique 52 cigar. Moving into Chapter 2, Los Tres Comandantes, the Three Commanders. Out of nowhere, the expectant silence in this little cabin just shatters. Three legendary historical figures step right through the threshold into Dantes' dream. And Cruz brilliantly uses the distinct personalities of these three commanders to explore completely different ideological approaches to the country's modern problems. Now, this is where Cruz does something really clever. He actually pairs each historical figure with a specific premium cigar and rum and uses them as metaphors for their distinct ways of analyzing policy. It's a fascinating choice. Fidel Castro sits down with a Cohiba Lancero and Habana Club Tributo, which represents a need for strategic, structured, long-term planning. Much like the slow, deliberate combustion that his long cigar requires. Then you have Camilo Cienfuegos. He's enjoying a Romeo y Julieta Churchill and Santiago 15 years, symbolizing a much more accessible, practical, and community-driven approach. And finally, Che Guevara is carefully examining a Trinidad Fundadores paired with Ron Muñoz, totally reflecting his highly scientific, ideological, and structured mindset. As you can probably imagine, Dantes is absolutely stunned. He's completely floored, but the tension suddenly breaks when a voice rings out and says, "Sit down, compañero. We know who you are, and we know why we're here." With that dramatic flair, the characters all take their seats at this rustic cedar table, light their cigars, pour their rums, and gear up to debate the 10 intense socio-economic chapters that make up the very core of Cruz's novel. Which brings us to Section 3, the material struggle. The economic crises. Here, the characters begin to impartially unpack the island's severe economic challenges, putting a heavy focus on inflation, low wages, and food scarcity. In the book, the three commanders get into this incredibly dynamic debate, proposing potential solutions. Fidel suggests a gradual economic opening. He compares it to the slow unrolling of a tobacco leaf during fermentation, making sure to maintain key state sectors. Camilo, on the other hand, passionately argues for decentralizing decisions to empower autonomous cooperatives. And Che? Che emphasizes a system of participatory planning based heavily on human values, completely rejecting standard capitalist metrics. But despite their different angles, they all agree on two massive points: unifying the monetary system so it reflects the real value of labor, and shifting away from subsidizing products towards subsidizing the actual people who truly need it. To really hammer this point home, Cruz gives Camilo this absolutely brilliant, folksy line in the novel. He says, "A fisherman knows better how to fish than any bureaucrat in Havana, carajo." It's such an entertaining line, but it perfectly highlights the author's recurring theme here: practical, decentralized problem solving. It's really all about trusting the creativity and knowledge of the people actually on the ground doing the work. When the conversation eventually pivots to food scarcity, they don't just complain. They lay out a specific roadmap for achieving food sovereignty. They talk about delivering land directly to the folks who truly want to work at. They propose establishing agricultural markets driven by supply and demand, though heavily protected by minimum nutrition guarantees. And they advocate for creating scientifically founded agroecological communes. Just like that Santiago 15 years rum requires immense patience and time to properly mature, the novel makes the argument that true agricultural reform requires that same time, flexibility, and deep trust in the farmers. Now let's turn to Section 4, Systemic Infrastructure. We're talking energy, tech, and health. The debate around the cedar table shifts to tackling the crumbling electrical grid, the heavily strained healthcare system, and the really limited internet access facing modern citizens today. And here's where the metaphor of the run union really shines. The author uses this rum, which, by the way, was scientifically designed to perfectly pair with cigars, to argue for a flawless symbiosis between modern technology and Cuban tradition. The characters propose a massive transition to renewable energy. They want to empower local neighborhood brigades to fix their own grids without having to wait around for centralized permission, and they push for guaranteeing universal internet as a basic citizen right. It is entirely about integrating modern, cutting-edge innovation with traditional grassroots resilience. And when they touch on healthcare, the novel drops this beautiful proverb into the mix. Medicine heals the body, but joy heals the soul. The characters emphasize that, sure, structural investments in biotechnology are absolutely critical, but fundamentally, a healthcare system needs both technical excellence and profound humanity. A sterile, sad hospital environment isn't going to cure anyone. Joy and hope are pitched as being just as vital as the medicine itself. Next up is Section 5, Emigration, Isolation, and Autonomy. Isolation versus bridges. The narrative takes a deeply human turn here, digging into the painful realities of mass emigration, international isolation, and the incredibly suffocating effects of excessive centralization. Cruz uses this part of the dialogue to impartially contrast two totally different mindsets. You've got the old paradigm, which relied on rigid centralization and basically viewed expats as people permanently lost to the nation. But the proposed paradigm in the novel? That advocates for local municipal autonomy, a multipolar diplomacy that can actually adapt to our complex modern world, and vitally, viewing the diaspora, people exactly like our protagonist, Dantes, as an economic and cultural bridge rather than some kind of threat. So how do they tackle the brain drain? They lay out some really concrete ideas for retaining young talent. They talk about modernizing diaspora investment systems and creating affordable housing so young professionals and couples don't have to live with their parents forever. They also heavily emphasize fostering a completely sincere national dialogue with zero censorship. The novel actually compares preserving this human capital to the careful, controlled combustion of a fine Cohiba cigar. It requires the absolute perfect environment to thrive and actually realize its full potential. This leads to what might just be the most powerful moment in the entire book. Fidel delivers this sweeping, strategic thought. The true test of a social system is not how many walls it needs to retain its people, but how many bridges it can build for them to return by their own will. What a quote. It just beautifully and succinctly encapsulates the novel's whole stance on embracing the Cuban diaspora as a vital, necessary part of the nation's future. And finally, Section 6. Una nueva revolución, a new revolution. As the night drags on in the Sierra Maestra, we move into the climax and the epilogue of the story. The pace of the narrative starts to slow down. The oil lamp in the dream cabin is flickering, throwing these long, mystical shadows against the wooden walls. The rum bottles are almost empty. So, what's the ultimate synthesis of this intense, smoky debate? Well, the characters conclude that a new revolution within the revolution is what's really required. They all agree that a movement has to constantly reinvent itself, but without losing its core essence. Unity has to be found in diversity, not some forced, imposed uniformity. And most importantly, the new generation has to be allowed to actually take the lead with support rather than constant tutelage. To symbolize all of this coming together, Dantes takes the very last sips of their three distinct rums, the strategic Tributo, the practical Santiago, and the scientific Union, and mixes them into one single glass. But then, right as these final lessons sink in, the oil lamp just completely goes out. Boom! Darkness envelops the cabin. Dantes feels himself falling through this whirlwind of time and space, and he abruptly wakes up in his modern-day Havana hotel room. The magical realism of the dream totally fades, pulling him and all of us right back into the stark reality of the present day. Which leaves us with this massive, lingering question.
how might we actually reconcile the ghosts of the past with the demanding realities of the future? Edo Cruz's literary thought experiment doesn't hand us a magic wand to fix everything, but it absolutely offers a fascinating, structured, and really entertaining framework for how we might approach modern crises through open dialogue, respect, and a little bit of imagination. I really hope this explainer sparked your curiosity to go check out the novel for yourself. Thanks so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.